So hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. For those of you who just joined, welcome to our show. What we'll be discussing today is how to land your first UX research job. And we have invited an awesome guest who did that successfully and now has lots of experience in the field. We'll share many of her insights about her journey and answer questions. So something to point out. So I do have bad news and good news for you. So the bad news is that Erica, who was supposed to be our original speaker, who was supposed to be here, let me know earlier today that she is in a hospital, unfortunately. So she will not be able to join us.
Nice.
And we actually almost wanted to cancel the event. However, I also have great news for you. Carrie, who is one of our mentors and is a senior researcher, and have also landed her first role at a global bank, have agreed to join us today. So she's amazing at getting hired into UX roles. So she's done it many, many, many times. So you can learn a ton from her. And she basically really mastered that and is actually a more senior UX professional. So I'm really excited to have her on the show. We'll introduce our wonderful guest in just a few minutes. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Michael, and I'm the founder of a company called BeginX. We help people who know UX basics and want to transition into UX. Our program is a part-time UX career accelerator with real mission-driven client projects that provides a guaranteed way for to become highly marketable and land a UX role. And unlike most traditional boot camps or career programs, we allow our participants to build real experience, strong real client portfolio, crucial softer skills like UX team collaboration, client and stakeholder management, and presenting to clients, and master the UX job search and interviewing necessary to actually land a UX role, all in a collaborative and fun environment and under the guidance of industry practitioner mentors from top companies. And I don't mean this to brag or anything like that, but just to give you a bit of a background for credibility purposes. The company is headquartered in New York City and have run many virtual cohorts, and we so far helped about 160 people or so get hired and become marketable. We will tell you a bit more about our virtual program and also make a special announcement closer to the end of the event. And of course, that part is completely optional for you. All right, so let me just switch the slides here. So here's some of the companies that the grads are hired by. So we've basically seen lots of people go through this entire UX career transition journey. A few quick housekeeping items. As we discuss the topic with our guests, we'll pause a couple of times during the event to take some questions to make things more interactive for you. And you also will also take more questions after our interview as well. So if you have a question, as we're discussing certain topics, please make sure you write it down or capture it somewhere so you remember to ask it later. Please, please, please use the Q&A section. It's a special section. If you're less familiar with Zoom webinar products, it's a special section that you have there in addition to the chat. So please use that for asking questions. And this way, you as well as others can also upvote others' questions, right? And we can ensure that we take the ones that everyone is most interested in, like the most burning ones, as I like to say. Our assistant event organizer, Michaela, she goes by Mika, will help out and review and keep track of all the questions. Also, as usual, we'll record the events and may publish it later at some point after editing is completed. You'll be able to find it on our website and on YouTube as well. Sounds good? All right. So before we jump into this discussion itself, let's very briefly set the stage for the discussion and cover a few quick concepts that will help guide this discussion effectively. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. We'll just cover this very, very briefly, just run through these slides very quick, as I want to give our guests an opportunity to share all of her insights and give you an opportunity to ask a lot of your questions. We'll try to cover all of the questions that you have. All right. And by the way, we'll share a career transition roadmap handout at the end of the event. So stick around if you'd like to get that. All right, this is just one of our key principles, starting with the end in mind. So essentially, if you've been to some of our virtual events before, right? So first of all, welcome back. Great to have you here. Some of these principles and slides might look familiar, so just bear with us. I'm going to cover this quickly as we want to make sure those who are new to our events get this quick but useful overview as well. So essentially, you want to UX this whole career transition journey and think from a standpoint of an employer. All right. So you want to become a candidate who employers look at and think this is definitely someone who can solve their specific problems and hit the ground running and bring value to their company. And they need validation and proof that you can actually do that, which they look for when recruiting and evaluating your application. So here's a quick, very high level overview of the key competencies that you need to gain. We'll explore these areas in a bit more detail on next few slides as well. Right, so basically hard skills, softer skills, real experience, 3 or more strong comprehensive UX case studies. This is basically what you need to gain yourself, or how you need to build yourself up on the left side. And on the right side, you'll find more of the career stuff like portfolio that shows the case study skills and experience, resume and online presence. After that, UX interviewing and storytelling mastery, as well as mastery of effective UX job search strategies. Okay, so again, very high level, but these are the key things that are very important. How did we come up with this? Basically, this slide just says that's not out of thin air. Did lots of interviews, interviewed 30 plus employers, by now probably many, many more. Did lots of events, analyzed lots of job postings, ran over 100 events by now with candidates and employers, and basically a lot of research. And since a lot of you are interested in UX research, so you probably appreciate this, that this is based on actual research, not just us kind of making it up. All right, so essentially, you know where you need to be, right, in terms of those competencies. So let's explore a very simple framework for how you can actually get there. So here's a high-level overview. First, you learn the essentials, right? Again, this very simple framework consisting of a few steps, right? You learn the essentials, the foundations of UX, the key principles and concepts, the UX process, methods, deliverables, and tools. And so typically, this is like the most straightforward phase that almost no one has any questions about, right? So next, we call the next major phase practice and grow. So this is probably the longest and practical, most like hands-on and practical phase, where most of your real learning, skill building, and experience building will take place. This phase is mostly about applying, practicing, learning things in more depth in the process, and in the process, advancing your skills and building that crucial real experience. After that, we like to call this phase just creating assets, or asset creation. It's all about creating those search assets, as we call them. So this essentially involves packaging and presenting all the skills and experience in an effective portfolio, resume, and online presence. Key phase necessary to position yourself as an attractive candidate in your job search. All right, and the final phase is search prep and execution, which involves learning and mastering effective search strategies, the UX interviewing process prior to kicking off your search, right? So you want to master all these key phases, right, before you start searching for actual jobs. So we found that a lot of people really like this product or service analogy. So essentially, the first 2 phases are actually quite similar to building a product, and we call them learn and build stage. As you can see, like these first 2 phases, learn essentials and practice and grow. The last 2 phases are very similar to marketing and selling of that product. So that is how we refer to this stage. So essentially, the first big mistake that people make is that they do not build a great product that is attractive to employers, which means you do not develop your skills sufficiently, or you do not have any experience. And if the product is not great, it will be very hard, if not impossible, to market and sell it, even if you're a master marketer. So the other big mistake that people make is, after building an amazing product, they do not devote much effort to really dive in and understand what marketing and sales is all about. Basically, the thinking that just having the skills and experience is enough, and then it's just a matter of applying to a ton of jobs. Just click and apply. meaning they do not really understand any of the science behind the marketing and sales and what those are, which means they do not put enough effort in order to position themselves as an attractive candidate, and do not really learn what effective search strategies are and how to navigate the hiring process successfully. And if you do not do that, you can also get stuck looking for jobs for a very, very, very long time if you get there at all. So on this slide, you can basically see how the key competencies that you need to gain map nicely into the transition journey. So you see when you can attain which competencies, right? So this is essentially a high-level view of what you need to have to be a highly hireable candidate, and when you can attain that particular, right? Because it's very important not to focus on your key roadblock at the moment. Here are some of the key points. Then we'll jump into the actual interview, to the most fun part. So start with the end in mind. Understand where exactly you need to get to be that highly hireable candidate by potential employers, and how you will actually get there. Ensure you have a solid product before selling. Otherwise, you can waste a lot of time, months or years in some cases. Once you have that solid product, it is key to learn, practice, and apply the principles and best practices behind marketing and selling in order to get hired faster. And it's crucial to not to confuse what phase you're in. So understand where you are and what may be blocking you from making progress, and focus on what is most important at the moment. So do not spread yourself too thin, doing too much at one time, as that will yield very, very little progress. All right. So this is just basically gonna set the stage for us. And now let me unshare my screen. We basically like to use this very simple and easy high-level framework to guide this transition. Sure, it's effective and efficient. Awesome. All right, so now let's get to the most fun part, as I said, and introduce our awesome guest speaker, and then we'll jump into the interview. So Carrie, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining us again. I'm really excited to have the discussion with you because, again, as I mentioned before, you have a ton of experience with this. You really mastered how to get hired and did that many, many times with many top companies. So I think people are going to learn a ton from you. And I saw how you progressed in this career and grew a ton, right? So really excited. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. My name's Carrie Beasley, and I started out in 2017. I was working as in medical device sales in New York City, and I was driving all over Connecticut and all over the city watching surgeries. The product that I sold was for video. It was a product to control the screen for surgeons who are doing arthroscopy. So the screen is where they watch what they're doing, because they have scopes that are inside a patient's joint. So they don't cut the patient open and look directly at the joint. So they have to look at the screen. So I had this product that was a screen that could be controlled by a tablet. I knew I wanted to get into UX. So I had a UX coach, a career coach, who told me to make a case study about observing people using this product. And so I gave a talk. She told me to give a talk, which was way outside of my comfort zone, to a UX research meetup group, which was in New York. And of course, New York has all these meetup groups. Other places might not, maybe have fewer, but so I did give a talk, and it was a 10-minute talk. People were invited to give a talk about research they're working on. And so I signed up, and I was able to do it, even though I wasn't really a researcher yet. So because of that, I was able to meet the two organizers of the meetup, and I'm sure they're not the organizers now, but the key for me was meeting people at these meetups and developing relationships with them, even if it was just, hi, how are you? I've seen you before. I'm Carrie, that kind of thing. Just very, very informal. But I also volunteered for a lot of different places when they needed, like they had an event and it was free to volunteers. I would volunteer, so I didn't have to pay to get in. So I was doing that all on the side, but while I was doing that, I was taking, in my free time, I was taking boot camps. I took one at General Assembly. I took the BeginX course and was a student there. And I was interviewing for positions. And I interviewed for a position at a company that is an agency that gives, that does UX research for big clients, big clients like Google and Facebook and these kinds of things. And I got the job, but it was not a research job. It was the first foot in the door, for UX, in the field of UX, from sales and marketing and whatever kinds of web design things I was doing before that which were making me no money and weren't very fun. Anyway, so I was working at this agency in a sales role. But as I was in the, let's see, I'm not sure what happened when or how it happened, but I was taking the BeginX role and I had already completed the General Assembly, course. And I was almost finished with the BeginX course when I had an interview with JP Morgan Chase. And the way I got that interview is at a volunteer event. People who attended were asked to wear a green sticker if they were hiring and a red sticker if they were looking for positions. So it was one of those things. Everybody had a sticker on. And so I saw a guy that I had met before, and I walked up to him and introduced myself and said, I noticed you're hiring. And he said, yeah, I work for JP Morgan Chase. And I said, I would be, I'd be thrilled to give you my resume. And, I don't know. I remember what I said, but I mean, you have to be not too shy to walk up to these people. And anyway, so that ended up connecting me with the executive director of the program, the user experience program at Chase. And a year later, it took a year for me to interview successfully with that company for a role that fit my qualifications. And after a year, I got hired there, and that just happened to coincide with the time that I was a student at BeginX. So while I was a student, I was hired at JP Morgan Chase. But before BeginX, I had been working and doing networking and working with a career coach, and sort of creating case studies. So I wasn't completely new, but that was what allowed me to get my first position at JP Morgan Chase. And since after a year, I was made a full-time employee, and I stayed for, I think, 2 years, just over 2 years, and I really liked it. But I had an opportunity to work at a startup, a kind of startup that was hiring a whole new UX team. And so I worked there for a little while until it became clear that they didn't really want a UX team. So those are the pitfalls that you have to look out for when you're interviewing with companies. You want to know who you're interviewing for and what it's going to be like. And so I made a mistake and left Chase, went to this other company. It didn't last very long, but after that, I had enough experience with financial services organizations that I was able to get contract work with. I got a contract with Huge, an agency in Brooklyn, for a short while, and then after that, it was American Express, Edward Jones. Where else have I worked? I should know these. It's been a while.
That's when you know you have a lot of experience by now, right? When you forget where you worked.
Right. American Express, Edward Jones. I worked for Silicon Valley Bank. I did a contract with them for 6 months, but that was right when COVID happened. And so that was, everything just sort of imploded. Of course, the whole work from home, work from here, work from there, everything. So since then, I left New York in 2020, and I've lived since then in Boulder. I've worked in Nashville, but I've always worked remotely. A couple of years ago, I started with DirecTV as a contractor, and I have just recently accepted a role as lead UX researcher with DirecTV as a full-time employee. So after a couple of years of being a contractor there, they've offered me a full-time role.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah,
That
thank
wasn't
you,
too
Carrie.
long.
That was. I think it's probably not. It's like not an elevator pitch, right? It's unless the elevator is going to like 1,000th floor.
No, but it's a really convoluted kind of route, and I think it's important for people to know that it's
I'm
not
just
a
kidding.
straight shot often.
All right, yeah, no worries, no worries. This is great. Then we'll jump into much more detail for all of your different jobs and stories. And
Okay.
so let's jump into the discussion. So I'll facilitate the discussion, might have to interrupt occasionally to just ensure we're on time, on point, and basically ensure we have a chance to like go through all the questions, and I'll give the audience a chance to ask plenty of questions as well. So also for all the folks in the audience, just a quick reminder, if you have a question, please use that Q&A tab. This way you can also upvote others' questions, so review all the others' questions as well. And we make sure we address the most popular ones that many people are interested in. And ideally, yeah, please just read all those questions and yeah, don't be shy. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible, hopefully to all of them, because the whole purpose of this event is to ensure that you guys get lots of great insights and you can learn from Carrie and how she did this transition, and basically she can share a lot of those insights with you. And just a reminder, we'll make a special announcement about the program that we're running closer to the end of the event, and we'll also share the career transition roadmap summary handout as well. So stick around if you'd like to get that. All right. So, Carrie, you already answered some of my questions, I think. Remind us briefly. So you mentioned before you started making this UX career transition, you were doing marketing and sales, right?
Yeah, I was sort of going back and forth between web design. I was traveling, I was living in different places. I was a kindergarten teacher. I worked on yachts for a while, like in Florida. I mean, I have all kinds of different things I did in my past. I worked for a maritime school, worked for a yacht outfitter, just a bunch of different things. Marketing and sales is kind of an umbrella term for all the positions I held.
Okay, amazing. What were some of the biggest challenges for you in the beginning, like when you were starting this transition?
To get people's attention. It was a really popular field, and it was hard to get the attention of people who were hiring. I feel like those personal relationships are really important. I think that back when I was trying to get into the field, New York City and maybe San Francisco were places where you could get work. It was sort of ground zero for that field, and you kind of had to be there. Nowadays, we've had the pandemic. We've all been working remotely for at least part of that. So I feel like now we may have better markets for employment in the UX field in other cities around the country, and there may also be more opportunities for remote work as well. So I think that's one thing that's changed, but that still is a challenge to build. It's more of a challenge to build those personal relationships with the community, with the UX community, if you're not in one of those places, if you're working remotely and you're trying to connect with people remotely. So, you know, it's one thing to walk up to somebody at a party and introduce yourself, or an event where there's a speaker or something like that, but it's another thing to try to bombard somebody's LinkedIn profile with your messages, and it's just hard to get people's attention. That's the biggest challenge for me in the beginning. It really was.
Okay, awesome. So let's first take a quick step back and basically start with a bigger picture of where like the end in mind, so to speak. So in your opinion, right, to make your job search more effective, so it makes sense to first find out what employers are really looking for in UX candidates, and then make yourself an attractive candidate. So in your opinion, what do you think are the top 3 to 5 most important things that define that highly attractive candidate? With UX research specifically,
With
or
UX research, yeah.
since that is your main background.
Yeah, specifically with research. I've never worked as a designer, so I can't speak to that, but I do know that curiosity, an attention to detail, uh, the ability to speak to almost anyone is important. You can't be a shy person, because you've got to strike up rapport with participants if you're going to interview them. And you need to, like I was saying earlier, build those relationships with people that you might not know yet, to sort of network and get into the field. But as far as, do you mean, I guess, qualities that you naturally have or skills that you would build?
I think it could be both, but probably more about, I would be more interested in the actual skills, like what you can build, what you can, so something that's someone can work on, right? And someone
Yeah.
can build
Well,
themselves up
here's
at.
what I was doing. This is super important. Thankfully, I had a job where I was driving all over the place in heavy traffic. So I spent probably 4 or 5 hours a day in the car, and I listened to every single podcast about user experience research or user experience design that I could find. Whole podcasts full of people talking about the field and people talking about the work they were doing. What that does, I'll speak to that in a minute. I also read every book that I could find. I researched online, what are the top 20 books? What are the top 50 books you need to read? And I set out to read them all. Because what you need to know is, A, are you good for this work? Because I didn't want to, I had been doing things that I didn't like. I had gotten tired of the work I was doing, and I did not want to do that again. I didn't want to jump into a field where I thought, might like this, but maybe not. I did a lot of research to understand whether it would be a good fit for me, and I would be happy there. And so that I would suggest to anyone, because it's not going to last if you don't do that. If you don't enjoy the work, because sometimes it can get pretty mundane and focused and granular about the least little detail, and you have to really care about that kind of thing. Yeah, so the other thing I would say is, listen to podcasts, do the reading. The point I wanted to make about the podcast and the reading is, when you read these kinds of things, when you listen to people speak about it, you start to adopt that language, and you start to know how to use the language. And if you know how to use the language, you will gradually become more knowledgeable, and you'll understand. Even if you don't have experience, you can still speak to people about the work. And that's part of how you would impress someone that you just met. You would sound more like you know what you're talking about. And you want to know what you're talking about. You also want to talk to people about the work they do and understand how they're talking about it to you. So those are two really important things that I did in the beginning.
Okay, awesome. So in your opinion, what do you think are the most important hard UX skills that employers look for?
Hard
Or technical, like not soft side of things, but more of hard skills.
Well, I think that it's an advantage right now. It would be an advantage if you had qualitative skills, for the skills that you would need as a qualitative researcher and the skills that you would need as a quantitative researcher. So you might, if you have the time and the resources, you might want to take a course, if you can find one specifically designed for statistics, excuse me, that would give you some qualitative skills, like maybe, and I'm sure there are books out there. There's one called there's one by Jeff Sorrow, who is he's sort of a guru, a quantitative person, like a thought leader. You want to read that kind of thing, and if you can't take a class, you can't afford one, just get a book and start reading about analyzing quantitative research, because that, for me, that's really difficult. I am more of a qualitative researcher. And if you have both qualitative skills and quantitative research skills, you are just that much more marketable to a hiring manager as a UX researcher. You're not just one or the other. Yeah, that's important.
Mhm.
Become well-rounded. I think it's also valuable to have done projects in your previous work that you can translate and uh, speak about in the you could create okay, so I'll give an example. Like when I gave the case study, when I created the case study of watching the surgeons and the nurses in the operating rooms working with the system. If I can read the books and understand and take my General Assembly course, or understand how to talk about this in a case study, understand how to build a good case study. And now I'm quite certain there are far more resources online than there were when I was working and building this case study. So I don't know that a career coach is necessary at this point either. So building a good case study from something you're doing at your current work is also a good way. And to get that out there, do some talks, join, go to conferences if you can, get in and do a talk in front of people in your area, in front of business leaders, people who are business owners. There are like business leaders. I'm not sure what it's called. I'm not going to remember what it's called, but there was a business. It's a business networking group, and it's BNI. BNI is the name of it, and it's in New York City. It's the kind of thing where they come together every month or so at 7 in the morning, and all these people who own these businesses go and talk to something like that. Speak about your work and say, I'm interested in doing some low cost UX work for someone. And you get experience working with a real client out in the real world. So I would say experience with a real client would be great. If you can get it at your current job, that's great. If you can sort of take on a project that you might be able to work into a case study, that's wonderful. If not, go out and find something like that you can change and research and
Okay,
create a
okay.
case study from that.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, then we'll come back to case studies and basically dig in a little bit more detail as well. So in your case specifically, let's do a very quick recap. How did you go about getting those like hard or technical skills to actually know what you're doing, to like understand UX better, to obtain those skills? So you mentioned, I believe you did GA course, then you did our program, and what else did you do to obtain those hard skills?
What do you mean when you say hard skills? Give me an example so I can answer the question right. I just want to make sure I don't give you.
Yeah, how to research properly, like the actual more technical,
How to-
like the stereotypical skills that people think is like the main thing needed to get a job, right? And it's important, but it's only like one of those key phases, one of those key pillars, right? Like how to do research, what are the deliverables, what are the phases, how do you actually get
oh
those
yeah.
skills, etc.
Yeah, you just do it. You have to jump in. You have to fake it till you make it. I mean, the skills that I had, here's the interesting thing about my journey is that I was working as a salesperson. I had to communicate how to use this system to nurses who were not tech savvy. They were not technical people. So I had kind of a crappy product that I was trying to teach them how to use. So that kind of communication is one thing. But the other thing is you have to I guess I interviewed people for a living. I mean, I interviewed people without knowing I was interviewing people, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. So you're asking questions, you're listening, all those things are really important. And reading between the lines about what someone's really trying to tell you, those are all things I do every day. One of the things that was a breakthrough for me is at the first job I had, where I was in sales for the agency that did UX research. I volunteered to be, someone asked me to be a pilot user for a test that they were just about to start. So I got to sit there and pretend to be a user for one of the researchers. So I knew that this is what I wanted to do. So I watched her as I was doing the participant role. I watched what she did and I thought, oh, I can do this. This is not, I mean, these were people who were working for Google. And so Google was paying the agency hundreds of thousands of dollars probably for this service. So as this woman was interviewing me, I remember thinking, okay, I can do this. I'm watching her do it. And I think I know why she's asking certain questions. So that gave me the confidence to sort of say yes when opportunities came along. Yeah, just jump right in. And if
Okay.
and the other thing is to have the humility to understand when someone's criticizing you and say, well, I think you asked a leading question or you did this one wrong or whatever. You just have to understand that you have to show a hunger to improve to people who are who you're looking to impress, who you're looking to get their attention, and be willing to take that advice.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. So basically, it sounds like you primarily use the learning by doing approach, right? So you
Oh
basically
yeah.
obtained some skills like that you maybe later identified that were transferable from the work that you were doing before UX. Then you did GA's part-time course, I believe, right? To just kind of formalize things a little bit, understand the methodologies. And then you did our program to actually build real experience and portfolio, et cetera, and kind of crystallized all of that into actual skills that you
Yeah,
developed.
and the skills, I mean, there's always software that you learn, but I had been using the Adobe suite for a long time. I've been using obviously the Microsoft, but I don't do a lot of design in my role. So other than making a PowerPoint layout look readable. But yeah, those kinds of skills were technical skills that I already had.
Okay, okay. Awesome. And by the way, I see so Ganesh raised the hand here. So Ganesh, make sure you use the Q&A tab and put any questions that you have specifically in that tab. And also, this is just to highlight a reminder for everyone, please review others' questions in that Q&A tab and upvote the ones that you're more interested in. And then once we'll start from the top, typically, right? Make some exceptions, maybe occasionally, but yeah, review others' questions, upload them, feel free to comment, etc. So be an active participant. And we'll take a couple of questions in a second as well.
Do you want me to choose the questions or do you want to tell me which ones you're going to answer? How about
Not yet. But
Okay.
yeah, we could do both. We could do both. Basically, yeah, we have like a list of interview questions for you, and then we'll try to take almost like all the questions from Q&A if possible, if that will be possible, hopefully. And yeah, we'll see. But yeah, Zoom makes it easier because you're able to like prioritize and do the upvotes and etc. So yeah, again, make sure everyone that you guys review others' questions, upvote them, comment, and so we know what are the most popular ones. Kind of using the 80-20 approach. So Carrie, how about softer skills, right? So soft skills. I think it's sounds like it's probably similar to what you did to develop more technical skills, and soft skills you'd probably have even more skills that were soft from your previous jobs, right? So anything else you want to mention in terms of like obtaining soft skills, how important they are, what's the best way to obtain them, and how you actually did it?
The soft skills thing, I don't believe those are things you can, you either have them or you don't. I mean, you can't learn to be a good listener when you've just not been that kind of person your whole life. Or you can't be analytical either if you haven't been that way your whole life. The whole reason that you're probably attending this is because you're already that kind of person. So you have those sorts of skills. You're a listener. You really listen to what people say. You are an observer. You watch what's going on, and you can sort of understand what's going on under the surface of a situation. You're analytical. These are all things that are good to have in a UX research role. and if you're working in a corporate environment, that's a whole other set of things that not a lot of, I mean, there's a whole set of good and bad things that you need to know when you're working in a corporate environment that are annoying, just kinds of things, how it is, how to sign it, how to sign an email. I mean, all these kinds of things you'll learn if you get there, if you decide to work for a corporate kind of giant like I did. But you might choose a startup, which is a whole different type of environment, or an agency, which is another whole type of environment. Like things move really slowly if you're in-house in a corporate environment. If you're in an agency, they move really fast and you're working with a client. So you get to know that client really well. But then you leave and you don't work with that client anymore. So that's kind of, over time with DirecTV, I've been working with them for 2 years. So I have 2 years of research in my head. So there's like a deep dive into certain corporations. But as far as soft skills go, being empathetic, understanding what's going on when you observe a situation, learning how to read somebody, especially over like remote meetings, because I haven't met with any research participants in person since I would say since Chase. I mean, even when because Chase had a lab, no other place where I've worked has had a UX research lab where we brought people in, we sat with them face to face, et cetera. So, being able to understand the mood and create a rapport with somebody over Zoom is probably one of the top soft skills that I have.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think it's you touched on an important point. I think it's both, right? Some of it is nature, but I think a lot of it is nurture. And probably the most important part is someone's willingness to actually develop them. Because if someone thinks that, okay, I'm already perfect, I don't need anything, or I don't do things that way, of course, it's not going to be useful. But
well, I don't know too many people that think they're perfect. If you're a narcissist, you're not going to do well in this field.
It's a good point. So basically, if someone really wants to, right, they can definitely improve in skills like communication or presenting or team collaboration or client interaction or empathy, listening. I think empathy can be a little more nature, but you can still develop it if you really, I mean, my opinion is whatever you really want to develop, you can. If you really want to, you'll be able to get there, right? And you just have to be humble enough to admit that you're not good enough at something and that you
humility is important.
Yeah, another important soft skills or trait or whatever. Yep. All right. So we have lots of questions here. Love it. Again, please remember to review others, upvote others' questions as well. Carrie, let's talk briefly about experience. What are your tips? How do you break into UX without professional experience?
If I had to do it and I didn't have the resources for a course, well, first, I think I would take a course. I think I would take a course or a boot camp or something like that, where I could meet people in that field and milk those relationships for all they're worth. I mean, really create those bonds, because people hire people they know and people they like. And if you can be the kind of person that someone wants to work with, and they understand that you're a hard worker and that you're curious and that you're kind of a go-getter, to use a tired phrase, then they'll give you a chance. The person who I worked with, the first boss I had, the executive director at, her name was Natalie. She was great at Chase. She said to me, once I got in there, she said, when you first interviewed with me, I knew I wanted you here. I just didn't have the position for you. So I had to wait a year until we got a request for a role that I knew that you'd be really good at. And she said, what impressed me about it was your enthusiasm. So she said, I knew you were inexperienced and I knew you had never worked before, but I also could see that you had passion and that you really really wanted this, and you were excited to get in and learn as much as you could. And that is something I can't teach. She said, I can teach everything else. I can't teach that passion. So, I wouldn't be afraid to let people know that you know, let people know that you're interested in it. You don't want to become annoying. You need to know the line to cross, you become annoying and irritate someone. But if you can tell someone sincerely that you're really interested in this in a way that they can hear and understand, eventually that will come back if you tell enough people who are in positions where they might know of a position that's open for you.
Okay, okay, awesome. Um, so let's talk briefly about some ways that you could also build that work experience, right? As you mentioned, right, you would say maybe take a course, maybe take a boot camp like you did, right?
Mhm.
Let's explore what are different ways, because basically, if you look at all those job descriptions, even entry level ones, most of them, even for entry level and junior roles, still want a few years of work experience.
Mhm.
And well, first of all, just a disclaimer, right? Based on our research, right? It's not always true that you must have a few years, right, of work experience, but you do want to have some experience, because if you don't have any, then it will be very tough. Um, so what do you think are some ways that people can build that work experience when most employers already basically look for that?
I would as a researcher, I think that's different if you're a designer, but as a researcher, I think you could go, um, you could, one of the things that you do as a researcher is sort of analyze websites. So you can sort of figure out what the problem is here in a certain website. Go through different key flows in a website, for like Amazon, or, probably not Amazon, because Amazon spends a ton of money on research already. But some companies that are out there, um, and people use their websites, understand what you should be seeing, like get the background knowledge and be able to analyze what you're seeing on a website, analyze the experience, and poke holes in it, and figure out what you would do to improve things. Say there's something wrong with a flow on your insurance site, and I'm sure there is, because no insurance site that I've ever seen is a good website. But if you are able to, I don't know, I think that it would, if I had it to do over again, and one of the things that I would do is go and interview friends and family on camera. Um, First an experience on a e-commerce or some sort of site that you want to analyze. You found some problems. You think you'd like to change it. Come up with a moderator guide. All these things you can research how to do online. You come up with a research plan. You come up with a moderator guide, the questions that you ask during an interview. You've got the website in front of you, and you've got the user, the participant, like would be your mom or your brother or your husband or wife, or somebody that you would pay to sit down, like buy them a drink or something. But sit down and do some interviews with people and try to be as professional as you can, based on what you've learned, and perform those interviews. And then you can add those to your website and your portfolio online. Here's an example of me performing a study on such and such website where we learned this and this and this findings. I would go out and create those kinds of experiences, because then they have an opportunity to see how you interview people. And the more you read about how to do it, the better you'll become, and the more you'll have evidence that you've improved. Just keep trying, just keep doing the actual work. The reason I talk about interviews so much is because as a qualitative researcher, that's what I'm doing generally, is a lot of interviews, one-on-one interviews, discovery research, and usability testing. I do a lot of that. Tree tests, card sorts, those kinds of things, survey building. Those are really the bulk of what I do on a day-to-day basis. So if you, the more you can do that in your life, like maybe this is when I go back to what I said about curiosity. So maybe you pay for a Survey Monkey account, and you throw out a survey to the world about something you're curious about. How many people I don't know, with the political climate, you could send out something, what kind of people are conservative, what kind of people are liberal? I mean, just what are the qualities that, I don't know. There are lots of different things that you could go out and do in the world that would give you real world experience. Building surveys, doing interviews, changing websites, figuring out what's wrong with a website. Yeah, I would just look for opportunities to do things, and don't let, just don't sit back and say, I can't do it because I'm not in a class, or I can't do it because I'm not in a degree program. Just make your own opportunity, no matter how silly it seems, just do it. People who are in higher positions are going to be a lot more impressed with someone who's going out and falling flat on their face, but trying, than they are with someone who just sits and doesn't try.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And to also add to that, there are also many ways, right? And because you can just take a hypothetical product, right, and basically start doing research.
Yep.
Or you could also volunteer, right? That's what I love to suggest, right? And basically just do pro bono work for startups or for organizations and nonprofits or tech nonprofits. Ideally, some type of product company. So something is more similar to what you'll be doing in the future, right? So not just ideally, I mean, small business with a website, much better than, just something hypothetical. But ideally, you want to have some type of product, like a tech
Yeah.
product, right? That you'll be doing.
Well, like I was saying before, if you go to a business networking kind of thing, start with what would you like to know about your customer? What do you want to know about? What are your biggest questions about the people, the leads that you need for your business? And how would you how could I help you learn that as a UX researcher? Who do I contact? Like, what kind of people should we be interviewing, and what kind of, and then you build a screener, which is a tool that you use to choose. It's like a question and answer kind of thing that someone has to complete to even be interviewed, so that this person makes this much money, they are male, they are between these ages, they live in the Northeast, they're college educated or they're not college educated. All these kinds of things might be the qualities of someone, the demographics of somebody that's like a client or a customer of a small business that you approach and say, how can I help you find out more information about them? That's called discovery research. That's generative research. Like, let's talk about your experience watching TV, like I do all the time. Let's talk about the things you hate about your TV experience. What's the worst thing or one thing you could change? Those are the kinds of questions you would ask somebody to generate research, generate data, qualitative data, take back to the person who owns the business and is interested in knowing this stuff.
Awesome. So basically, in your case, so you probably had some kind of hypothetical case study from GA, then you had a real client case study from BeginX. Did you have any other volunteer projects or any other work in your portfolio before you got that first role?
Yeah. The case study I did for the ethnography, it was like a field study. I called it an ethnographic field study. I didn't know that at the time that that's what I was doing, but I was standing in operating rooms watching people use this product and having pain points. They were having painful experiences because the product didn't work or they couldn't figure it out. The surgeon is screaming at them. I built a case study talking about how these parts of the program are barriers and usability blockers for people trying to operate the system so that the surgeon can get through the surgery as quick as possible. Like, these are the kinds of things. That was a case study that I did. I also did a case study about lost surgical equipment. The company I worked for had surgical trays with hundreds of little tiny pieces in them that would go out, be loaned to a hospital or surgery center, and then they would come back. The sales rep would have that washed, sterilized after a surgery, and then bring it back to our office. And I would have to check and make sure that all those hundreds of pieces came back with it. And so um, I came up with a way working I was in sales, but then I worked in-house in the operations department, I guess you would call it, of this medical device sales manufacturer. So here I am in New York, and these trays are coming in and out, and we would lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment every year because the tray would come back without certain pieces in it. We'd have to order it from the manufacturer in order to go out and be used again. So I built a theoretical app that would be able to track these kinds of things and how we would get them back. So that was a case study that I did. There's also another one that I did where I spotted problems in my, so what I'm talking about, I guess, is I spotted problems in my current work, pain points, and I came up with mobile apps or, desktop, some sort of way, a solution to that, something that would solve the problem for, say, another problem I came up with the app with for was surgery, medical device reps. They have a choice to go to this surgery center, that one, or this one, but they don't know which one will have the surgery starting first. So they don't know, to manage their time, they have to know the schedules of all these places to know where they're going to jump in their car and go to next. So that was another connecting thing that I built. Like, you could, I don't know what it's called. Like the data, you could sync up with the surgery center's data and understand the next time a surgery was starting. Oh, this is starting first, it's soonest, and this one is closest to me, so I'll go there. This kind of thing, instead of wasting your time going somewhere and then waiting around for 3 hours. These were problems that I saw in the organization that I worked for, that I worked with my colleagues to sort of figure out a way we could, like an app, a scheduling app,
So essentially, at your previous job, even though your role was not UX research yet, right, you tried to find opportunities or problems to solve that you could potentially, basically, that were UX research problems that you could repackage as case studies,
Exactly.
right, and then add to your portfolio.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
mean, honestly, I was lucky because the work I was doing was that kind of work. Like, there were enough problems and enough catastrophes around me that I could think I had been there long enough, and I could see, oh, this is a recurring problem. This is something that all the sales reps complain about. So if we could, sync the data, it turns out that you can't do that because of HIPAA laws, but I still came up with a solution to sync with surgery centers and their schedules and all that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And by the way, for those of you who, let's say you're working and maybe you don't have such problems or opportunities, right? So what you can also do is just find volunteer. This question comes up all the time. I haven't looked through all of Q&A yet, but I'm sure it comes up all the time. So essentially finding volunteer opportunities, right? And how do you do that? So you can reach out to accelerators, you can reach out to startup incubators. This way you can actually find those product companies, and then you can just offer your services, right? It still can be, ideally you want to have a team with you, right? So you can have that kind of full-fledged experience, team collaboration. Maybe if you just want to do research, definitely get a designer, right? Because again, most companies, it's one process, right? Ultimately, it starts with research, but then it evolves into an actual product, right? So it's
then it comes back to research.
exactly. And so it's like one iterative process. So you can find those volunteer opportunities, startups, incubators, organizations that allow you to get connected to different companies. Ideally with a team, ideally get some type of mentor as well, or someone who knows what they're doing better. Because if you're just starting out and let's say the company you want to help is also not, maybe they are not experts at UX either. So you put the two together and it might be a long and painful experience for you to actually get somewhere. So ideally, you want to have someone like an experienced mentor who could help you guide through that process and guide you through that process and help you do it faster, right? And
Finding a mentor is a good thing. If you can find someone that you can speak to maybe once a month, you don't need to demand a lot of their time. But if you can find someone who's in the field that would be willing to talk to you, once a month or even once, just keep a list of the questions that you want to ask them. And yeah, I see somebody just posted ADP list. Yeah. ADP list is a great place for mentors. If I have signed up, or in the past, I've signed up for a mentor and signed up for a few meetings where the person never showed up. So just be careful and maybe try another one. Because I think there are some people on there who are more serious than others. But I would say persistence.
You signed up as a mentee or as?
Nope, as a mentee. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Back in the day.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So since we're talking about experience, I'm going to take a quick question from Rachel here. Since it's specifically about experience. So Rachel is saying most jobs have 3 to 5 years of experience and I have 1 year. Is it good to try and get an apprenticeship because I don't have a master's degree or years of that experience?
If you can, and you can afford that, if you can get a paid apprenticeship, anything you can do is going to help you. Any experience, any way that you can gain real world experience is going to help you. I wouldn't turn down an apprenticeship. I would never turn that down.
Yeah, basically, Rachel, so I would say, I mean, you could say the more the better, right? But not always, right? It's not like if those jobs say 3 to 5 years, now you have to somehow get that without actually having a job, right? So also keep in mind that whenever they say that, often if you're an awesome candidate, they can totally take someone with 1 or 2 years of experience in many cases, right? Sometimes the issue is just passing that initial filter, recruiter, right? That has a check mark, right? So that's why networking is crucial, right? Because if you just cold apply and if you're just one of those resumes in that huge pile, they just use that filter or they use their ATS and they just search and filter it out, right? So it's the guideline is usually like, at least like the guideline that we use, right, is having 3 solid case studies and having 2 of them with real clients, with real companies. Especially in the current market, it's still tougher, right? It's gradually getting better, right? But because of all those layoffs, it's still not completely back. It's still like gonna be growing long term, but we actually had like a great event with Jared Spool on that, and he talks about this whole like market situation. You can find it on our site under virtual event recordings. I think it's called "What UX Managers Are Looking For in Junior Candidates." Great event.
Great.
So he talks about that. So essentially, yeah, it's you want to have 3. So right now, because the market is a little tougher, right? You want to have at least 3 case studies. You want to have 2 with real clients. Projects ideally.
But that shouldn't, but don't let that stop you from going out there and meeting people. If you have 1 case study, or if you're working on a case study and all you can do at this point is talk to someone about the work you're doing, don't let it stop you. Don't be inactive until you have 3 case studies. Just go out and create those relationships and say, I'm doing this. I'm working, I'm learning this. I'm really excited about it. Let me tell you about it.
Exactly. Yeah, because networking can take a long time, right? It's ideal to start like ASAP.
Yeah.
And you don't have to ask for jobs, obviously. And ideally, you should ask for
build
jobs
relationships
initially. Yeah. Exactly.
And you have to be, you really want, I mean, this is the reason I said, it goes back to saying, be sure you want this because it takes a while. It's not like it's a field that takes a while to break into. So, yeah, talk to people, do like, what's a day in your life like? Talk to people like informational interviews and just say, just get more information, be a researcher, get more information, talk to people and say, hey, can I have 5 minutes of your time? I just have a couple questions about what it's like for you in working in this field or this industry. You'll learn bit by bit. If you just keep plugging away at it, you'll get there.
Yeah, and also if you're concerned about networking, right, since we're talking about networking, I always recommend this book. I'm not yet affiliated. Maybe in the future I will be. I don't know. Don't really care, but it's a great book called 2-Hour Job Search. It's specifically about
Michael, you in that book.
Exactly. No, because I always love that they created a system for informational interviews and job search.
Yeah,
it's clear step by step. It's only 170 pages, right? And it's I know that the name is like kind of clickbaity, right? It's like 2-Hour Job Search, but what takes 2 hours it's the initial setup of your search system, right?
Yeah.
And it's
And the
basically,
system is what
yeah.
makes you feel like, oh, I'm doing something. You're
Mhm.
you're entering things in a spreadsheet, you're following that system, and that can keep your morale up when you're discouraged.
Exactly. And a couple of books specifically about networking. One is Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi, right? Specifically about networking. Um, Influence by Robert Cialdini, right? One of those softer skills, marketing, selling, influencing stakeholders, etc. Great book. And Mika, if you can find them, please put those in the chat. Influence by Cialdini, Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. So all those Italian last names.
Yeah, and
Not on
it's
purpose.
a lot of times,
Um,
I mean, I know a lot of researchers who are basically introverts, including myself. And so that's not always easy to never eat alone. Like, oh, that drives, it's like, that strikes fear in my heart to go sit with a stranger. But I mean, I haven't read the book, but I can imagine what it's about. And I just feel like, it can be really hard, but the more you want it, the more you're going to do it. You know, it's a painful part of the process. But once you get that first job, um, everything it'll be great. I mean, even if the first job is a nightmare, you at least have experience. And now you know people in the field, and now you know who you can talk to. Are you looking over here? Oh, are you looking over there? How about over there? Are they doing any hiring? That kind of networking is a lot easier when you're in the field.
Exactly, exactly. And never eat alone, by the way, it's not, the key point is not to just never eat alone, but
Okay,
I
good.
would say it changed my outlook on networking, because initially I thought, oh, this like superficial business card exchanges and sleazy stuff, but it reframes the whole thing as, like you said, as relationship building. And if you like helping people, if you like building relationships, that's much better than just networking and exchanging cards, right? And if you look at it that way, if you build your network, if you help people and they help you, etc., and it's mutually beneficial, it just changes the whole outlook on like the way you look at it, right? So it's and it's better at those, like even those events, like better
Yeah.
to talk deeply to 5 people, right, and to actually build connections, and versus just come up to 50 and exchange cards and never be in touch with them again, unless you
Yeah.
need a job, and you still won't get it because you don't really click, or
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
really know them. All right, so it's all right, so Josh had a question here. I know it has 4 upvotes. Amazing. Where and how did you find volunteer events similar to the JP Morgan Chase event?
That was when I was in New York, and the field, I mean, it was like ground zero for UX field. So I was lucky that I was lucky that I even had more than one meetup to choose from. And I don't even know, honestly, I was trying to find a meetup the other day, and I'm not sure if people even use meetup anymore, because it was kind of like, oh, there's not a lot going on. But I don't know. Part of me thinks maybe if you don't find UX meetups in your area where you can go meet people in the field, then just create a meetup, and just put a signal out there and send a bunch of emails out to people on the platform and see if you can't drum up some interest in it, or maybe broaden it to like tech enthusiasts or something, somebody who's in the design field, or developers. They all work with UX people now. Developers do. So I don't know. I would go to some related field. I would start with UX. And then if I couldn't find that, I would open up the focus to fields that are adjacent to UX, like product management, or developers, or startup founders, and things like that. It's hard to do this if you aren't in a real city with a real industry. Some cities have I mean, some cities have a particular industry that's where, like the headquarters is in that city. So, look in that area if you're for your own city, wherever you are.
Yeah, yeah, and also just attend more events like this, right? Or more events,
Yeah.
more other types of events. And Carrie, you mentioned Meetup. Yeah, we still have our Meetup group, right, called User Experience HQ, right? That
Oh,
is
good.
in New York, right? So it's just that's kind of one of the positive impacts of the pandemic, I would say, right, is the whole like remote work culture being much more acceptable, virtual events take like really growing and blowing up, right? So that's really the beauty. I mean, that's one of the reasons that you were able, right, to just move all over the country, right, and still be able to work in all these companies, right? And
Yeah.
that's amazing.
I remember back when I was working in Fort Lauderdale at the yacht art outfitter. I was working for a terrorist. This woman was just awful. And I hated my job and I hated my life. And I can't even, I still sometimes think, I can't believe I get to live where I get to live in the middle of the woods in northern Michigan with my dogs. And I just get online every day and I have a normal salary and I work for DirecTV, which is out in Seattle. I mean, I'm so lucky. I mean, but it's taken me a decade to get here. So
Yeah,
you can do
yeah.
it.
Amazing, amazing. That's yeah, and you can also lots of meetups, right? We partner with the other meetup that Danny runs. That's a lot of you. I know a lot of you guys came from yeah, UX support group, right? So and it's amazing meetup, very active, right? So
There are
lots of
Slack groups
online
too, Michael,
Slack
right?
groups,
There's Slack groups of UX
Discord.
professionals. Yeah.
Yeah, Discord channels or Discord servers, I should
Yep.
say, and Facebook groups. Yeah, lots of communities, right? And we also run the newsletter, right? So we send out the newsletter with these virtual events
Mhm.
that you guys will be able to find us as well.
It's an old one, but another thing I suggest for people to listen to is a podcast called the UX Intern. I know it's not, it's a very old one. It's not even active anymore. But the way that the reason I suggest it is because I listened to that and it was done by a guy. It was hosted by a guy who was a UX intern, and he was interviewing the people that he worked for about the work, about the mindset, about the field. And that's kind of gave me a broad overview of what this was going to be like and whether or not I was going to like it or not. The kind of work I would be doing, the kind of thinking I would be doing, the kind of people I would be surrounded by. And so I found that one to be really helpful. But there's another one called Awkward Silences that I like. Yeah, there are a lot more UX research or UX design or UX research podcasts now than there used to be. A lot more.
Yeah, yeah. And Jacqueline had a related question as well, right? So I think we already pretty much addressed most of it, right? So how do you approach networking virtually when there are not many in-person opportunities, right? So anything else you want to add to that, Carrie, in terms
I
of
would
how
say, you
to
know what
work?
I would do is I would not, I mean, one of the jobs I had in my other life was a search engine optimization product manager or project manager, excuse me. And so I got really good at searching, like all kinds of search keywords and how to search, how to find things online. And so I would just keep saying, UX online groups, UX online meetup groups, UX networking online, all kinds of different keyword phrases that you can think of that might bring you to somewhere like those Discord groups, like those Slack groups, a place where you can find other people. I mean, start on social media, start on Instagram, start on X, start on in places where you can people are posting about UX. I'm not sure if they are on I don't know if they are on Twitter, X, whatever, but I'm sure there are other platforms where people are doing this. And I would start researching them. I would get an account in here and there and everywhere, and I would search people who have UX in their profile title or whatever, and just connect with them, send them direct messages. Just don't be shy, don't be annoying, but don't be shy either. And just cover all kinds of ground, because now there's so much more that you can do remotely than you used to be able to do. Used to be you had to be in person really to get anything done, but it's not really like that anymore.
Exactly, exactly. And Jacqueline, I hope you also heard what we were mentioning about those books, right? So read that book. It's great. I'm really love basically promoting informational interviews, right? It's a great way. You can just really scale out your outreach, use LinkedIn, reach out to many people, position it as an informational interview and run it as an informational interview. And then you click with some people and that may lead to jobs and referrals, etc. Right. So then you can really like dial that in, right? And have lots of meetings, lots of those virtual coffee chats, which many people probably even prefer, right? Because they're like easy, efficient, right? You don't have
Yep.
to go and drive anywhere, right? So,
Right.
and
Yep. I see, there's a question on here, that Jacqueline Gordon asked about a case study with NDAs and in a highly regulated industry. Can I take that one?
sure.
Can I answer that?
I see, I see.
Sorry, I don't mean to take
Feel free,
control.
jump.
I
No,
just
no,
thought, I
feel
mean,
free,
that's a really
jump in.
tough one. I was gonna say that you can talk about it, but you probably can't give screenshots or anything like that. And the other thing you want to be aware of is if you give a case study that has, you know, private or protected information, that is not necessarily a good sign for anyone you're showing that case study to either, because they might think, oh, she doesn't have respect for that company's NDA. Why would she respect ours? So that's a tough one. I mean, I guess I would block out as much as you can, talk about it as much as you can, but protect those places where you're not allowed to, like maybe an unbranded case study where you don't, block out the name of the company.
Yeah, you could ask them potentially if they would be okay with you, so to speak, sanitizing that, right? And basically, like you said, Carrie, like
Yes.
not using the name, but keeping the other stuff. I mean, but obviously confirm with the company, right? You don't want
Yeah.
to just, as you said, I think, Carrie, that's a huge point, right? So you may think, oh yeah, I'm just gonna show this case study, but they're judging you, right? They're not judging, but they're evaluating you, right? And they'll think, oh, okay, she'll probably do the same thing to our work, right? If there's an NDA, right? So always
Yeah.
keep those ethics in mind.
Yeah.
All right,
Especially for the big company. Yeah. You want to
Gary, what else do you want to add in terms of creating an effective UX research portfolio? What do you think are the top 3 things that would make a UX research portfolio effective, in your opinion?
I always, whenever I'm mentoring the Begin X course, I always tell people, you want your portfolio to be clean, readable. Really need to pay attention to whether it flows in a one direction. It's easy to read. You can go from A to B, B to C, and that kind of thing. I've seen them junked up with too much text on there, too much, it's unclear what you're talking about. You don't want typos in it. You want it to be well written. But one of the most important things is that you have a short version and a long version. You got the short version that will take 5 minutes for a case study. And then you have the long version where you can talk about deep dives into the ideation phase or this or that, or one little part of it and what the interview meant. You can really talk to that about you can talk to someone who wants to know, or you can even, if you have that portfolio online, you can have options for people who want to take a deep dive, but you have also a quick option for people who want to skim right through it. If you can do that on your site, that's pretty valuable. You don't want to make it too buried. You don't want those case studies to be too hard to find. Yeah, but don't, you want to use the language of the industry, and you want to use it correctly and effectively, which means reading and listening and understanding. So, also, you know what, I will go back to the other thing I want to say is it's really important to be a good writer and a good communicator in UX research, because if you're not and you stumble over your words, it makes it very difficult for your stakeholders that you work with to understand what you're telling them and how they can improve the product, because you are the conduit between this person who's the user, the user or their customer, and the people who create the product, the site or the product itself. So you really need to be writing, reading, and communicating and speaking well to those people. So work on those skills too. If I were, just starting out and those were really uncomfortable places for me, I might join Toastmasters. Just go in and get really comfortable talking in front of groups of people, because that's what you'll be doing as a researcher. You'll be doing readouts, you'll be answering questions, you'll be talking to groups of strangers. I had a readout the other week that was with 65 people. So even if I'm sitting here at my dining room table and none of them are in the room with me, it's still daunting to think, oh my God, 65 people are watching me talk right now. So work on those skills while you're working on that networking thing. Just keep going with those speaking skills, those writing skills, read and write, do all those things.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Carrie. So I see quite a few questions here. Amazing job. So love all the questions coming in. We'll try to get to as many as possible. So I see a question from Nancy. Nancy, great. Thanks for joining us. Good to have you here. Being a UX researcher, did you have much UI design to showcase in your portfolio? If not, how would you end your case studies?
Well, at the time, I was taking UX design boot camps, and I didn't really know that I would end up as a researcher yet. And part of the thing about portfolios is they don't want a perfectly polished UI to show. You need to show your process, and that's what people want to see. So it's not going to be crisp and clear and perfect. I don't know if that's what you meant by the question, but I showed sketches. I showed sketches of interfaces that I designed, with a pencil. I drew them. I did the best I could, and I explained things. I made, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a tool out there where you can scan a little piece of paper and then make little hotspots in it and test a prototype. I don't remember. I'm sure there are better ones now, Figma for one, but yeah, I mean, use any tool you can, and I don't know.
Did your case studies end with those sketches, or did you
No,
showcase like what the
no.
rest of the team did? Or
Well, I always tell people to start with the benefit that you brought with your work. So start the case study by saying, we recovered $100,000 worth of surgical equipment for a busy surgery office in New York City, so that app has impact, and that's the hook that gets people in to look at the rest of your case study. Start with the impact, but then I guess I don't know what you mean by ending. I mean, I talk about the process. I talk about how the case study starts out by the impact. Then I talk about I present the challenge. Here's the problem I saw. Here's how I went about solving it. I interviewed these people. I interviewed people in the sterilization department of the hospitals. How do you lose these products? How do they get misplaced? I interviewed surgical techs who brought the surgery tray down from the operating room to the sterilization department. How do you think these things are getting misplaced? I interviewed sales reps. How do you think these things are getting misplaced? So I talk about, you literally tell the story of the research you did. I talked to this person. This is what they said. I talked to this person. This is what I learned from this person. And at the end, I bring all that together, and where you see gaps, you create something to fix that gap. At least in my case, that's what I did. And then it also doesn't matter if it never gets built. It doesn't matter if you never developed anything, because you can do a case study about the research itself. You can talk about the problem that you're solving and the interviews you did and the population you interviewed and what you talked to them about and what you learned, because that's the research part. You can talk about that's maybe if you're designing something, but if you want to evaluate a product that already exists, then you're going to do evaluative research. See, all of these terms will become clear once you start reading about user research. Once you start learning about it and hearing people talk about it, there are different types of user research case studies. One would be for usability study we did on this, silly little website here. And we found that, 95% of the people couldn't figure out how to put something in their cart or whatever it is. And here's a suggestion to how to fix that. Those are the case studies that are most cut and dry. But the ethnography one in the operating room, you would describe a situation where so-and-so couldn't figure out how to, start the surgery. So the surgeon is looking at a blank screen and he's getting angry, and the woman can't figure out how to start the pump, start the equipment that the surgeon needs to perform the surgery. So if she can't start it here, then they can't start the thing. So then the whole surgery center is behind on surgeries for that day. So you talk about the effects of this app not working and the usability problems that you see there. So you talk about the ripples effect that would go, and you talk about the problems, and then you talk about solutions that might work. And you redesign it and you show those visuals. But really, it's just all about your thinking process for solving problems.
Yeah, exactly. And
Who do
if
you
you
need
work
to
with
talk
it,
to gather that information to solve that problem?
yeah. And if you work with a team, right, then you can actually, if they actually prototype it, design it, etc., then you come back to research, right? Then you can showcase the whole process, right? That's probably the strongest one, right? The whole comprehensive process.
Yeah, and then you'll finally get to a point where you're going out of your mind with boredom because you're researching something that is the label on a button. Should it say submit or should it say enter? And you have these hour-long, day-long meetings about that. And you just think, oh my God, I'm going to go crazy. You know what I mean? So yeah, be careful what you wish for.
All right. Gary, what do you think were your biggest mistakes that you made in your portfolio, resume, and maybe what others you think the mistakes that others make as well? That you've seen?
Mistakes. You're going to make a ton of mistakes. I made a ton of mistakes.
What are
I
the
mean,
biggest ones?
it's
Top three.
not going out and doing it, not being not having an appetite for it, like thinking, well, I don't really feel like going out tonight. It's, I don't want to go to that networking event, whatever, these kinds of things. That took, that caused the whole process to take a lot more time than it should have if I had been more of a go-getter, somebody who went out and did these things. And I guess but you can't, I don't know, you can't be extroverted if you're not extroverted, you can only take so much of that. But I don't know, Michael, because I don't, mistakes are not that's not how I frame it, I guess. I don't think about, I can't bring up a mistake because I think of them as in the past. I'm sorry. I mean, just be open, go out and do things, talk to people. I would even research online, best ways to network, UX research, job search, all these, just find it all and find people out there who are doing the same thing as you. Find a buddy, you maybe go to the event together. Or an accountability partner, someone who's going to hold your feet to the fire when you're ready to give up.
So specifically with regards to your portfolio resume, you can't really think of anything specific now? Something that you thought later, maybe, oh, I should have done it this way, and this cost me something, blah, blah, blah. If not, that's okay. Maybe you can think about it, and
maybe I'll think about it. I don't know. I all I'm saying is I made a ton of mistakes. I mean, it's sort of like being in a maze, oh, I reached a dead end. Okay, go back, turn around, go to another place, do something else, figure out another way to get this done. Scare up something else that I can grab onto if things get too calm. You know what I mean? Go out, poke someone else on LinkedIn, contact somebody or attend somebody's till you get somebody to talk to you. And then you talk to them about, with your most recent questions or your Inertia is a huge mistake. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. Keep,
Yeah, I already see Luisa applying your advice, looking for an accountability buddy in New York City
there you
to
go.
go
Yeah,
to
yeah.
UX events together. See, way
Because
to go.
you'll maintain your enthusiasm, because it's really easy to just stay where you are and not move forward. I have a sticky on my fridge that said make forward progress. So not giving up is the biggest mistake. Or giving up is a big mistake, because you can do it, especially if you're in a big city like New York or somewhere
Yeah.
in LA. There's really no excuse. You just got to go out there and meet people and keep on doing it. Keep on
And
learning, keep on reading, keep on doing all the things.
look at every rejection as every pain point as a step closer to your
A
goal.
learning
And,
experience. Yeah. What could I
and
have
by the
done?
way, before I forget, so I see that, so Luisa mentioned, um, not Luisa, trying to read the chat while it's jumping. Rachel mentioned, Rachel, I think you messaged only to host and panelists. So when you guys send a message, I think the default option for some reason that's it's on there on the chat is host and panelists. So make sure you choose everyone to make sure that others actually see your message. So Luisa, you might have found an accountability buddy. Nice.
Yay. That's great. Yeah. Keep doing stuff like that. Go out of your
Rachel, yeah.
comfort zone.
So put your message in the general chat so Luisa will see it. Awesome.
Yeah, I would say go out way far out of your comfort zone, man. I did that talk. I mean, if I had known that I would be speaking in front of a bunch of about 100 people who had UX research jobs already, I would never have done that. But my coach said to me, and she was English, so she of course had this voice that was just like, you will not tell me no, and you will go out and you will do this talk. I will coach you how to do the talk, and then you will go do the talk. And I did the talk, and it was excruciating. It was awful. But I did it, and it got people asking questions about the work, and I started feeling like I wasn't an imposter. I got rid of that imposter syndrome, which still is around these days. Everybody has imposter syndrome at some point, but people respect you if you go out and do stuff like that. They're impressed if you go out of your comfort zone, and it's people admire that. Even
Awesome,
hiring
awesome.
managers.
It looks like Rachel and Luis are connected. Amazing. So,
Great. Love that.
I love that as well. And by the way, for those of you not in the same city, right, you could still be accountability buddies. You could still be
Yeah.
accountability partners, right? So just feel free to share your LinkedIn's there, and just you don't have to go everywhere together, right? You can just keep each other accountable to accomplish
Mhm.
something, right? So it's all right. So another question from Julie. So Carrie, let's come back to how you landed the first role briefly. I think
That's hard for me.
so you mentioned you landed that first role by basically networking, going to that event, and then meeting people, right? And what Julie is asking specifically, how did you land the contract roles early in your career? So I think you already talked about it, but you want to just
Yeah.
do a quick recap. So networked your way in, right? And then spend like a whole year basically
The
interacting
thing
with those
about
people.
the contract roles are, the contract roles are through an agency. I have a recruiter, and you find one you like, somebody who knows what they're doing and knows what to look for in someone who's a UX researcher. Some people are just blanketing UX with a position that they have, that's the UX researcher role, and they're just like sending it out to everybody, and you get one because of some word in your profile. You can answer them, but probably 5% of them are going to be people that know what they're looking for, and they chose you for a reason, and it's a good reason, and you can have a conversation with them. I don't know how easy it would be. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like it would be so easy to get a contract role as a beginner, because they're all looking to present the best recruiters are looking to present the best candidate pardon me, for the role. And to do that, they're not going to choose someone, they're not going to take the risk on somebody who has doesn't have a background in it. So it's easier to get contract roles if you've already had a role. I don't know how right I am about that either, because like I said before, if you keep doing things and you can talk about it, like you know what you're doing, and you can sort of present the things you've done as experience, like working for clients, you can get away with slipping in the door with some experience, but that isn't really experienced. Do you know what I mean? Like you can have experience with a real client, like a contract position or a free position, or somewhere that you work for very low money where they don't have to know that. You can do this work and you can talk about the work you've done as though it's a contract position, but nobody has to know that you did it for free, or you met the client at a business networking place, or that kind of thing. Or it was your uncle's colleague, you know what I mean? Like something like that, like someone you knew, you were able to do a project. You got to be scrappy. You got to be scrappy.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. So Josh is asking, and by the way, we'll be wrapping up relatively soon. I know we're running a bit short on time because time just
Are we?
flies, right? We are, so not like right away, but yeah, we'll take a few more questions. We'll go through a few more questions, but yeah, we are running a bit short on time. So Josh is asking, how frequently were you interviewing during your contracts? Did you notice you wanted a new role fairly fast due to your experience performing multiple contracts?
I was not. I still wish that I had stayed at Chase, because I had a colleague there that I absolutely adore. We got on like a house on fire. We worked really well together, and I learned, I mean, I couldn't ask for a better mentor. And so I did not interview for other positions while I was at Chase, but I would suggest interviewing constantly, because you can never be too good at interviewing. It's a skill, and you need to understand how interviews change in your field, and how your answers might change. And you need to be comfortable interviewing, because that's a huge part of interviewing well, is feeling comfortable in the moment and having a bunch of resources in your head on an ongoing basis that are things you can use to illustrate a point or answer a question in an interview. The more comfortable you are with your experience, talking about it, and again, communication. All those interviews that you do are practicing effective communication and clear communication to someone about the work you've done. And you can never do that too often. Plus, there are a lot of people out there that say that that's the way to go to get really far, and to get a higher seniority, is to always be interviewing. No matter what position you're in, always be interviewing for the next one, or looking forward to the next one, whether it's internally or externally with another company.
All right, awesome. Cliff is asking, are there specific tools or software in UX research or design that you can learn to make yourself more attractive to employers?
Yes, Figma.
Hopefully. Right.
Yep. Figma is a good one to know. But if you're a researcher, really all I use is, unfortunately, PowerPoint and Excel. And I can't stand either one of them, but that's what I use on a daily basis. Yeah.
So you can't use Keynote or
I
Google
wish,
Sheets
God, I
or-
wish they would switch to it, but we have software. For a while, I tried to do my reports in Mural because I can't stand PowerPoint, but it just doesn't work. You know, if everyone is making PowerPoint decks, then you're not going to be the only one not doing it. Researchers don't, I mean, Figma is the big one right now. Excel, Word. And then the other thing that I use are online platforms, but those are paid. You have to pay for a service like MUIQ and user testing, user Zoom. I think those are the ones that I mostly use.
Yeah, and maybe Miro for like virtual whiteboarding and flows, and right now they're expanding into like doing more stuff.
Oh,
But
great.
honestly, Cliff, um, it's tools are not gonna get you very far, right? It's more, it's great, like it's great to have that keyword on your resume, right? And it's important, but it's not like your core competency that will actually nail it and get you there, right? So it's more about the case studies, it's more about the experience, it's more about your ability to demonstrate all your softer skills, like how you collaborated with the team, with clients, with others, with developers, with etc. Right? So it's that's
Mm.
usually the most crucial part, basically. And then you sprinkle tools on top of that, basically. So we already talked about podcasts briefly. Carrie, I know you mentioned you couldn't remember specifically, but if anything comes to mind later, let us know. I think Julie asked if you recommend any specific UX podcasts.
Oh, boy, all you got to do is search UX on your podcast player and a ton will come up. Those are my favorite. Awkward Silences is by a guy who has, oh, let me look and see. I can't remember. I don't remember what company he has, but the guy who started Awkward Silences is good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking him up.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. You could do that later. Let's
It's by user interviews. Yeah. That's a company, that's a platform.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Nancy is asking a more tactical question. What is the best approach when messaging hiring managers or anyone who is working in the company you want to apply to over LinkedIn?
I would ask them if they have, I would ask them, um, if they have 5 minutes, or if you can ask them a couple questions about what it's like to work at that place and find out if they like it and find out
Exactly.
how big their UX department is, you know? And if they feel comfortable asking, if like ask that person if they feel comfortable giving you a name of someone who you might speak with about what it's like to work in UX at that company. And then they'll
Exactly.
they either will or they won't, you know?
Nancy, it's all in the 2-hour job search book with exact scripts, with exact scripts. That's how basically you do informational interviews. You reach out to them, right? You first position it as you want to learn more about the company, and you do learn more about the company. And then if you click, you may be able to get a referral from that as well. All right, so it's yeah, definitely come back to that book. Carrie, what else do you think, if you can think about anything else, any other things that prevent newer or more junior candidates from getting hired or make them less look less attractive to employers?
We've covered a lot. Persistence, you know, come across as someone who's, you know, wholesome, eager to learn, no matter how old you are, no matter what you've done before. Talk about your problem solving skills, how you like to make things better. And I mean, all the things we've talked about are important. Learning is important. The downtime, spend that time reading about, read the books, read the blogs, read Don't Make Me Think, you know, read Jeff Sorrow if you think you might want to be a quantitative researcher. Take courses, find things on YouTube, watch people moderate interviews. That's another one that's huge. Is it's harder than it looks. It's really a lot harder than it looks. So how can I learn how to moderate an interview, a user experience interview? Search people doing that on YouTube. I would just continually, the more you read, the more you'll realize that you don't know, and the more you can research about that thing. So the more you learn and listen to these podcasts, the more you're going to figure out holes in your knowledge to fill with online research or with reaching out to people in LinkedIn. There will be
Exactly,
no
exactly.
shortage of things you want to learn about. So,
Yeah, and we have a whole framework, basically designed on like all these key check boxes, right, that you need, not as a, experienced candidate, blah, 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 but as someone who's looking for their first role, right? Or maybe their second role, if they spent just a little time in that first role, right? Essentially, what is needed, what is important. That's why we offer these, and we'll tell you more about this in the end. And it's basically offer like a career. I know some of you booked that already. It's like first job readiness assessment, essentially. All right, so feel free to book that. We'll give you more detail at the end, right? And this basically helps. We use like a model, right, that we use to basically see like, okay, what is missing? Like, what are some of the checkboxes? What could you work on to build yourself up and to become more marketable and more hireable, etc. All right, let me see. Oh, Anna has a great question here. And by the way, just a reminder for everyone, right? So remember to read everyone's questions, or at least a few of them, and upvote the ones that you like the most, the ones that you're most interested in. So Anna is asking, research has always been a part of my design process to a certain degree, especially when I'm the sole UXer on a team. As a UX researcher, what would you say is the main difference between a research portfolio and a design portfolio? How do you differentiate yourself from a designer versus a researcher?
as a researcher, you're talking about the research part, which is the interviews, the usability test, the tree test, the card sort. You're talking about the data that you gathered from that. When you're a designer, you're talking about how you took that data and used it to design something. So you need to be talking about, as a researcher, you want to be talking about how you decided what needed to be learned. What do we want to find out? What are our research objectives? What do we want to learn to solve this problem, to design this app? Who do we want to learn it from? How are we going to learn it? What's the research method that we're going to use to elicit the information that we need? That's the story you're going to tell in your portfolio. If you're a designer, you're going to talk about why you chose what you're going to talk about, what you heard from the researcher that allowed you to create this interface. We needed, if like you're working with, say, an ed tech person and they need a dashboard where their school administrators are going to be able to tell how a teacher is doing on, these key points, you're going to need to design visually a dashboard that shows that. But that's not something I would talk about as a researcher. I would talk about the interviews that I did with school administrators and what we learned and the patterns and the responses that we heard. And that's what I would talk about. So by nature, your research portfolio or your research case study is going to be a lot less visual, probably. I mean, it's obviously going to be visual, but you're not talking about the design process because you're not a designer. You're talking about the research process. And I would look up some examples online. I would look for UX research portfolio. And if you can't find any online, I would go to LinkedIn, find UX researchers, and then look for their name portfolio.
Yeah, and often you also, I mean, a lot of people would have like a team-based project, team-based case study, right? So, and obviously, in that case, you just highlight, okay, my role was X. And you would still cover the whole process basically, but you just highlight and explain what you focused on specifically.
Yeah, if you meet people and you can brainstorm an idea for a project that you can do together, like Rachel and Anna, the people we just talked to who are now accountability partners. Maybe you guys come up with a project that you can do together and you can talk about each other as though you're some sort of agency and you're partners and you work with a real world client and no one will ever be the wiser.
Exactly. I think you meant Luisa.
I'm not sure who I'm sure I got the names wrong. I'm terrible. But
by the way, I'm looking at the chat. I love that other people are like acting and
that's good. Yeah.
Organizing. Amazing. Keep that up. Keep that up. Amazing. Love when that happens. All right. So what else do we have here?
Okay.
What's your opinion on take-home assignments, and have you done any before? Do you think they are more harmful or helpful for someone just entering the UX field?
You,
Tabatha, that's a question from Tabatha.
we've talked about that in the BeginX course too. Be careful with that because sometimes people want you to do their work for them and they take your work and they take it back to the company and they make money doing it. So just be careful. If they give you a take-home project that sounds a lot like the work that the company does, I would ask for one that's slightly less relevant here. Something that you could see, something where you could show your skill, but wouldn't be at risk of because you should be paid for work you do. That's a short answer to a long problem.
Yeah, exactly. And at the least, right, if they give you that assignment, ideally, right, it should be not about their product, right?
Right,
So
right,
that
right.
they're not actually benefiting from it, right?
Exactly.
Because I mean, there are probably some companies that just like to do a lot of interviews and maybe get their insights that way, or you basically use people in some way.
Yeah,
So
and
that's
I've
not
heard of
something you want to
things
do.
like that happening. So you
Yeah.
just want to be careful of that.
Yeah. So basically, ideally, um, it should be a project that's some other project, right, where they truly use it to evaluate your abilities and not just use your
Use your
food
work,
or
steal it.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. um, all right, so Carrie, um, we talked about your first role, right? So you basically use networking. Which search methodologies did got you most of your other interviews after that for other jobs? Like, did recruiters reach out to you? Did you apply? Did you network more? How, like, which methods, job
Wait,
searching
what's the
methods?
question? What question can you say it again? What
Yeah,
research
which,
methodology?
no, not research. What job search methodologies
Oh,
got you most interviews? So it looks like your first role, right? That was just networking through an event that led to that job offer. How about the other ones? How
the
did you
other ones
find them?
were all through. That's what I mean. Once you get that first role, your work will all be through recruiters. I mean, people will find you and you'll be able to find work because you will know people in the in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all my contract work was was through good recruiters who were looking for work for me after that. Um, and there are pros and cons to taking work, contract work or looking for in-house work. I mean, that's another thing that you could research online. There's probably a ton of information on Reddit or somewhere about the differences between those types of work. It takes longer to get an in-house position than it does to get a contract position, I would say generally. But I've spent a lot of my career in contract work, so I don't know if that's 100% accurate. I could be wrong.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Carrie. So I'm looking through the chat here. So I have quite a bit of question. Oh, Cliff is also asking, did you have your own mentor? What were the most valuable learnings you got from the mentorship? Or biggest
Uh,
benefits, I would say.
did I have a mentor? Yeah, I have I've had a few mentors along the way. Some are better than others. Some are uh not someone who's an official mentor, but the colleague that I worked with at Chase has always been someone that I can go to and ask about best practices in research, not necessarily in searching for work in the field of research, but best practices as far as being a researcher. I would definitely ask him about that kind of thing. Yeah, I haven't really worked with it officially as like a mentor like that.
Did you interact with anyone else, like from GA or from BeginX afterwards, or?
Yeah, but we were all basically students at the same level. So
Mm.
there were a couple people, there were a couple people that I met on the scene in New York who I spoke to. But they really didn't lead anywhere. It was one person was at Condé Nast, and that was the like he worked at Travel and Leisure, I think. And that I know that industry was kind of shrinking, so they weren't hiring a ton of researchers, or they weren't hiring It was a magazine and it was kind of going downhill, but, yeah, another person I met, Darren through BeginX, and Darren and I, both got hired by a company that, the company I spoke about who didn't, they didn't really want a UX team, it turns out. They didn't really want to hear the bad news about their product. So, you know, some last, some don't, but you make those contacts, and then that person, because you've worked with that person, you know what it's like to work with that person, and they know what it's like to work with you, and that will never change. So you just keep building more people like that.
Mhm.
That makes sense.
All right. Yeah, that's so yeah, and I would say when the question was asked, you said like, what are the biggest learnings? It's not necessarily learnings, right? So you can learn something from a mentor, but some of the biggest things is you can have accountability, you could have support, you could have networking opportunities, right? That they could help you with. So it's not just you learn something, right?
It's
Because
a connection. The mentor
mhm,
relationship is about connections too.
mhm.
It's about just, you ask them anything. You ask them anything about the field, the work, the daily work, the best practices, the expectations. And then you also build that relationship to the point where you can ask them for maybe an introduction to someone or
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
Okay, okay. So we'll be wrapping up soon. So I want to take a quick question from Cliff and then ask you another one briefly. Um, so this one is more general and kind of future of the field, right? Which I love.
Oh,
How do you see, so Cliff is asking, how do you see your field evolving in the next few years? So let's put on your futurist hat or what you're seeing so
I'm not
far
gonna be,
already.
I'm not gonna be very good at answering this one because I just don't, I don't really pay the attention to that. I know that's, I mean, I know that people are never gonna stop watching TV. And there are never gonna be people, we're never, people who make these products are stubborn and they don't understand the things that people want. So you can tell them over and over again and they still won't make it the right way. So they need, that's job security. I don't see, honestly, I don't see the field changing that much. I don't see the AI affecting us. I think it'll help us, but we're still going to need human beings to do the interviewing and the work, like, especially if it's a qualitative nature, that kind of data.
Mhm. Yeah, and maybe to add to that, I think it's essentially, I know a lot of people are still thinking and concerned about AI, right? And it's for like a good reason, obviously, right? The way we like to look at it, and I've actually been reading a lot of what Nielsen writes about it. Um, just look at it more as a tool, right? So essentially, um, a lot of UX folks, both researchers and designers, and it's like those unicorns as well, right, will just become much more productive and effective, right? And you'll be able to do much more output, right? And that's actually great news because many more companies will be able to afford UX work, right? Because right now, still, not everyone is doing it and not everyone can afford it, right? So there'll be much more output possible, right? And so it doesn't mean that if everyone is more, if people are more productive, right, then you need, like, instead of 10 people, you need 7, right? It just means that those 10 people can just provide and do much more work and just be much more productive, essentially, and just kind of raise everyone. So I know it's a whole separate topic, which can which can, maybe we'll run another event sometime soon with one of those influencers or someone who could like provide maybe awesome insights. All right, so Carrie, what I also wanted to briefly ask you is anything else you want to mention in terms of your biggest challenges, like, or your biggest mistakes, or that you had to overcome, and like some of your kind of insights learned from that you would advise to others.
Um, I I would just, my biggest piece of advice is to be persistent. Don't give up. If it's really what you want, don't give up. Um, keep on reading, keep on learning, keep on, you got to be the kind of person who wants to learn to be in this field. Because there's always something to learn, there's always something to improve. Yeah, and just keep on making contact with people, and eventually something will snap and you'll be in. But in addition to
Yeah.
everything else, that we've talked about.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So does anyone have any burning question, right? That's maybe like we've had a pretty long discussion, right? And maybe you think, okay, I really wanted to know this and I still didn't get the answer. So if anyone has a question like that, put it in the chat or Q&A and let us know. Like if it's, try to prioritize all the questions and take the ones with, like, ensure it's on point, right, on topic, right, specifically about UX research and landing your first role, right? So we try to like ensure we're focused and we're kind of on the top, focus on the topic that you guys came here for. So if anyone has any really burning questions, specifically on how to land that first UX research role, maybe again, you really wanted to learn something and you still feel like you that hasn't been addressed at that point. So we don't want to hear that after the event. We want to hear it right now. So if not, we'll be wrapping up in a second. I don't see anything new coming up in the chat or.
I'm trying to answer a couple of them if I can.
Oh, that's what you're doing there, Kira. I see you're
I know.
distracted a little.
I just, some of the answers we didn't get to, I thought it would be helpful. But someone else answered that one, yeah.
Okay, so let's take this quickly. Francine asks, how do you decide on a coach, where to look for a coach?
Well, you could find, what I would do is I would approach somebody who has the experience on LinkedIn that you would like to have in 10 years, or works at the company that you are interested in working at. I would approach them and say, would you be interested in coaching me once a month for UX research? Could I pay you to maybe give me some tips for 30 minutes once a month or something like that? Start small. That's another way you could do it. Or you could search online for UX career coach. There are a lot of UX career coaches whose websites I've come across recently. I just can't remember any of their names. But I guarantee you they're out there and they're not hard to find. They can be expensive, some of them, but yeah. Also, you should look at okay, so if you go and look at conferences that are big UX research conferences, and then you see their speaker list, approach those people and say, do you do any coaching? Do you do any individual coaching? Maybe you'd be interested in, maybe I could pay you for a conversation once a month or something about certain things. Treat it really informally and just approach people like that. Yeah. The authors of the books you read, the authors of the podcast, approach those people. Approach anyone that you see as an authority in the field and ask them if they'd be willing to talk to you, or you could buy them a cup of coffee. Or if you want a mentor or you want someone who's a coach like that, maybe they could coach you, answer some questions for you,
Yeah, those are great tips. Thank you, Karen. Francine, also just to add to that briefly. So I put a link, I think it's, I hope it's correct, but I think it's called Mentor Cruise. Mentor Cruise is like one of the sites where you can search for mentors. We actually had someone on here who is a career coach as well, Earl from Google. He's a UX manager from Google. He's awesome. So he's, I believe, feel free to reach out if you want me to like put you in touch with him. But here's one thing. before thinking about a coach, first make sure you're hireable, right? So make sure you're marketable, make sure, because the worst, not the worst, but like one mistake that you can make is what we discussed earlier, right? Is basically if you're just starting out, if you're just looking for the first role, right? If you're still not sure, like if like you could schedule that readiness assessment that we're going to offer you in a second. We can talk about it briefly. Again, no commitment to anything. And two, you could just do something like that or try doing something like that on your own, right? Because one mistake you could make is try to market yourself too much and sell yourself too much when what it needs, the actual work is the actual product, right? Like your skills, like your case studies, your etc. Right? So essentially, if you market too early and sell too early, right, you're just going to get much more rejection or frustration that it's like really necessary, which just can compromise this whole transition. So just make sure you're ready for a coach before you look for a coach, right? If it's purely a career coach. All right. So I know we're a little bit over time. So thank you so much, Carrie. This was awesome. Great to chat with you as always.
Thank
Hope
you.
hope you guys enjoyed the event and got some great insights. So as promised, special announcement about the program, right? So people often ask about our program. So as promised earlier, so let me also quickly tell you about this program that we're running, since it may be a great opportunity for some of you to not just build a very strong real client portfolio and real work experience, but also get the crucial soft skills like team collaboration, client management, and presentation, along with career prep to master UX job search and interviewing, so you can actually land a UX role. So who the program is best for? The program is best fit for ambitious people who know UX basics or can learn those independently, or come from a design, research, creative, tech, or related backgrounds and look to transition into UX in one of the most effective and efficient ways, and without quitting their current jobs or other commitments they may have. We're also pretty selective, and we'll look for motivated and committed team players. So what's BeginX? It's a part-time UX career accelerator program with real mission-driven client projects designed to help people transition into the field. We ran quite a few cohorts by now, helped around 160 people transition into the field and become highly marketable. Alumni of the program have been hired by companies like SiriusXM, Coach, Google, JP Morgan, many, many others. The program was ranked by SwitchUp as a best UX program and also featured in Fortune magazine as well as ADP list. The advisors and mentors are also UX practitioners from companies like Google, IDEO, Amex, DirecTV, The Economist, and many others. So what you gain after completing the program is build not just the hard skills, but the critical softer skills, real experience with a robust portfolio, expand your professional network, and master UX job search and interviewing, so you can actually land a UX job. In fact, our grads have done so well that we offer a money-back guarantee as well. So you either land a UX job or get your tuition back plus an extra $500 on top of that. So if it sounds like you may be a good candidate, you can learn more on beginx.com. You'll also see a link in the chat that Mika will paste there. So the next cohort is expected to start in January because of the holidays, and our cohorts are quite small and they do fill up relatively quickly. So act soon if you feel like it may be a fit. Also, to thank everyone in our community who attended this event, you would be eligible for a $500 tuition credit if accepted. To claim that credit, what you need to do is by tomorrow, Wednesday, go to the website. You'll see the link in the chat and request a free, no commitment first UX job readiness assessment that I was talking about earlier. This is similar to a career transition consultation, basically. And by the way, these consultations are designed to, it's not just some like quick program pitch, right? So it's not that. They provide an opportunity for you to learn about UX career transition best practices and pitfalls to avoid, get guidance, personalized advice, and ask questions about your own career switch and how the program can help, and see if you may be a good fit for it. All right. So you'll see a link in the chat. In addition to telling you about the program, I also wanted to mention that we frequently run different types of virtual events. So We'll keep you updated about upcoming events and share resources via our newsletter, which is sent every few weeks or so. Thank you again so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate you. And thank you to our wonderful guests for taking the time to join us and provide all the valuable insights. It was a huge pleasure to have you here, Carrie. And by the way, Carrie, what is the best way for folks who would like to connect with you potentially? Would that be LinkedIn? Okay.
LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn. Carrie Beasley, Kerry Beasley, Beasley.
All right. All
I'm
right.
on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Awesome. And I think Mika already pasted the link to your LinkedIn as well, which is
Great.
so
Yeah,
I'm
I
sure you
love
have
it.
lots of requests. So again, thank you for joining us. Amazing to have you guys here, and we'll see you at the next event.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Cheers.